Okay. Call the meeting to order. This is the Noise Containment Committee meeting on January 21st, 2020. Recording taping notification. As required by law, the town may audio or video record this meeting. Any person intending to either audio or video record this open session is required to inform the chair. Oh, okay. So we have tabled the minutes from the last two meetings until the 2/6 meeting. And the first order of business is to talk about plainly audible, which we've been putting off forever. So I put together some discussion points that dig into it a fair bit. There's one for you. One for you. Mr. Nickerson. Okay, so the charge goes into, we have to put together issues, and a big issue is the plainly audible standard. And I'm not sure that I don't think we have to come up with a solution proposal quite yet, though that's may have changed more recently. We just have to discuss it, do the research, and report our findings. The first big thing I really want to bring out is we were kind of dancing around who wanted what plainly audible to be last week. And the big thing is, just up front, the definition of plainly audible really, I think, affects the noise landscape. It's kind of a control valve. However we define it is going to affect how loud or soft the environment is. So it's a real critical piece of the noise solution, noise problem. So the big thing I wanted to do, that I've been waiting to do forever, is to go through this paper. We don't have to go into a whole lot of detail, but I hope we've all had some chance to read this. The big takeaway from this is a couple big takeaways. One is that it distinguishes between three kinds of codes. There are nuisance codes, which are subjective and vague and make things difficult to enforce well or fairly. They don't stand up to scrutiny by the courts. There's decibel metering, which may be precise, but there are a lot of downsides. One that's not mentioned in this paper is that there's just not enough time for us to get up to speed on decibel metering. But there's the other things that it brings out is that decibel metering has some downsides with transient noise, and I spoke briefly with Bill Rockwood about that. And he said that there are two issues I spoke with Mr. Rockwood about right after that meeting. The first one was, I purchased a decibel meter, $23 on Amazon, and it was really loud in my backyard one time, and the decibel meter was registering 43, which is like the sound of a feather falling. And so I mentioned that to Bill, and he said, well, that's because you bought a $23 meter. And he held up his $1,000 iPhone and said, this is what you should use. And so the first issue is, certifying what kind of hardware and software we need. Okay, so we're at some difficulty trying to figure that out. The next thing I mentioned is because I'd read this paper before, I said there are issues with transient noise, such as music or motorcycles going by, and he said, well, you do a max, an L max or something like this, and then that was all we had time to talk about. And
well, I mean, that is the thing with the decibel meter. Whatever noise is closer, sometimes automatically will read higher.
Registration.
Yeah, so they're tricky. I mean, I think we talked about that before, is that you never know what it's exactly gauging. You're just going to see the meter spike, if it's the truck passing or if it was a drum solo. So, but it depends on where you're measuring it from.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, in addition to what I've read in here, there are a number of difficulties with it. So just our getting up to speed on it is just going to be tough. Chief Guillemette has reported difficulties in the past in his talk with other police departments. We'd have to determine the appropriate equipment and software. We'd have to determine testing mechanisms and procedures. We'd have to determine once we get it, we'd have to determine levels that are equivalent to the plainly audible standard, whatever, then there'd be training of staff, there'd be calibration of the equipment, there'd be the costs and time and effort of equipment training, and we'd also have to draft in the bylaws. I handed out some things, some handouts a few weeks ago, and they go into a fair amount of detail. So,
And that has to go to town meeting?
no, this would, if it were for the license, it wouldn't have to, is my understanding. But it's still, we'd have to come up with a fair amount of stuff, and I don't think we're equipped to do it, at least not now. And then there's still some issue about, does it properly capture everything? Like, does it properly capture like low drums, or that kind of thing? So, I said this at an earlier meeting, I think the thing to do is to hold off on decibel metering now, and if we need it, use it later. It's also more expensive, and the chief didn't seem like he was keen to use it.
Well, he's also reached out to others throughout the country that, that he knows, and they said the same thing.
Right.
So, I think and we had talked about this, not the last meeting, because I wasn't here, but the meeting before that, about having, and Chief was here, about having guidelines for the officers, so that, okay, if they're at, say, your house, and they can hear the full lyrics, well, then yes, clearly, it's too loud.
Yeah.
So we have to have, instead of just hearing whether or not they hear, like, background, like they can kind of hear the lyrics. Well, we have to just give them guidelines, and then
Right.
that training, because right now there are some officers that, okay, if they hear Motley Crue's lyrics, well, then they know that that's, if they can really hear
That's
it.
the thing that's tricky. It depends on how well someone knows a song.
Right.
Like if you know it,
But
even
no,
if
if
you
you
hear
can
it
actually
faintly,
hear the
you're like,
words,
oh, I know what that
you know.
is.
So-
But then sometimes your brain.
But the
tells you-
definition
So-
of plain,
Yeah.
the definition of plainly audible that we already have doesn't talk about hearing lyrics.
Right.
You can have music with no sound that's too loud.
Or no lyrics.
Right.
Or no lyrics, I mean,
Right.
right.
So it's really quite a wide departure. The hearing the lyrics is a wide departure from the plainly audible. In fact, many of the plainly audible examples that I printed out in another handout specifically say the test is not whether you can hear it. So like at my house, all this last summer, 800 feet away, I heard this guy moaning, musically moaning, and I'm sure he was decent close up, but my wife and I called him the moaning guy. It was every Monday evening, it was like the moaning guy was playing. And it would get really loud, and there are no lyrics, and sometimes it gets so loud I could hear it echoing from the house across the street, and when it do that, I could walk up almost to Miles Street on Cross, and it's 1,000 feet away. But it wouldn't have met the test. So that's a wide departure from the plainly audible standard, the 150-foot or 150-foot plainly audible standard.
What's wrong with the definition that's in our current bylaws? Any sound from a source regulated by this bylaw that can be detected above routine or normal ambient background noise by unaided human hearing.
But,
What's wrong with that definition that we have? It needs to be put into our entertainment license. It's not there now, correct?
right,
yes.
that's on the second page, that's the big problem. There's a couple different problems with that, the definition in the entertainment license. One is the further, if I can back up just a little
Okay,
bit.
sure.
So one is the further from issue. Noise, as it reads now, noise from entertainment must be at reasonable sound levels which are not plainly audible at a distance
Of
of 150 feet from boundary line or source of sound amplification, system, whichever is further. So I've talked to two people, one of whom was my wife, and they think the further from is from the receiver, and there's no getting across to them. I could not convince my wife that it meant the other thing, and she could not convince me that it meant from the boundary. I happen to think, based on having watched the public hearing, that they obviously meant from the sound emitter.
From the source of the sound.
Yeah.
Right, that was pretty obvious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why can't we recommend that they change this? Because
Yes,
it's very
exactly.
big, 150 feet from
The boundary.
from the source of the sound.
No, that's not what they're looking for. That was what was already given in the bylaw. So they wanted to change that. They wanted to expand it.
So they want 150 feet from the boundary?
Right. That's what, if we're going to be fair, that's what I think that the public hearing wanted.
They want it from the boundary?
Right.
Okay.
There's,
Not the source of the amplification.
right. B, the reasonable issue. Noise from entertainment must be at reasonable sound levels which are not plainly audible, etc. Reasonable is a subjective term.
Yep.
And it just confuses things. It just clutters up interpretation of this. And removing reasonable and having a good, solid, plainly audible definition is better. So I think we have to, my feelings, we have to get rid of the reasonable.
So noise from entertainment must be
I've got an
at a
example.
sound level which is not plainly audible. You just
Right.
have to get rid of reasonable.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that the only thing with that is it's still going to be a little subjective because if we're going to create, so, I'm trying to think, what does it say without the word reasonable?
Well, I wrote it up.
Where is it?
If you look on the bottom of
Noise
page
from
3.
entertainment must be at a sound levels which are not plainly audible at a distance of 150 feet from the boundary.
Right.
From the boundary of the,
Licensee,
from the boundary of the licensee.
right.
Which boundary? I mean, they got four or five boundaries.
We
No,
could go
it's
in-
true, and you
No,
know,
you're right, yeah.
that's why to say from the source of amplification is, here's the speaker, here's the person
Well, they have
singing.
multiple speakers, right?
But
Yeah, true.
you're up at the bar, you're singing, you're the source.
Yeah.
So from where the source is, then yeah.
But then if you sing into a microphone, the speaker's over there,
What's the source?
sound amplification system, right?
And if there's a speaker here and a speaker
Well,
way over there, which,
But what's making the noise?
It's a combination, isn't it?
Well,
The singer and- yeah.
again, it's one of those, it's
Yeah.
not a clear thing. I mean, you could say that it's the person performing. Or you could say it's the speaker that is coming out. Well, but the person performing is the one that's making the noise that's coming out of the speaker.
Well, I would think you'd
Not that
you'd
it's
measure
noise,
it-
but you know.
If we have to go into these kind of weeds, I think you'd measure from the source of the singer toward the,
but the
Okay.
boundary line means that,
right,
that's pretty easy. You can go up to a boundary.
So what the boundary could be, so let's say we'll take,
If this is my house and this is the entertainment, I'm gonna measure from here over to my house. Not here
Or it
over
was-
to my house. I'm gonna
Oh.
measure from the boundary of the property over to,
where the 150 feet is.
towards my house to see if it's 150 feet, yeah.
So if that to that is 150 feet, then yes, it's too loud.
right.
And if the amplifier, if the singer's here and the amplifier's here, we're gonna measure from the
The boundary of the
boundary of the property,
What they're pointing at.
a straight line to my house. That's pretty easy to do, and,
In a way that kind of makes sense because technically the location can put their speaker anywhere at any time.
Yeah.
So
they can move
Yeah,
speakers
right.
around, they can move
if
singers
they want to put
around.
it on the very edge of the property.
So from the boundary of the licensee to, yeah,
So you weren't here, you missed last meeting,
Yeah.
but one of the points I did bring up was that though it's 150 feet plainly audible, in the bylaw, which is what the intent was in the public hearing, that's 150 feet from the source. When it's applied to the boundary, that adds a lot of distance. So what we actually have in place, if that's how it's interpreted, is more like, in the case of
200.
Amber, 250,
Yeah.
300, because Amber's 300 feet across. So so people ought to know that that's quite a substantial space.
that's why I wondered if you wanted it from the boundary or if you wanted it from the source of amplification.
Well, as a resident, I prefer it from the source. But I think in fairness, the public hearing, which I don't think was particularly fair,
Yeah,
the public hearing did publicly go through the process and make that determination. So I think in fairness, and I think we hold the public hearing, to other standards too. I think it's, have to be,
Yeah.
they went through the process, so, and at the top of page 3, the big problem in this regulation is that they dropped, though the public hearing went through the process of the whole hearing. I've got copies of the minutes of the public hearing. Bob Nickerson makes a few speeches there, short ones.
Was this the first hearing a couple,
This is
last year?
2016.
Okay.
I thought I had it. Do I not have it? Yeah, here it is. So, and I can, if you want me, I can email the links to you.
I've listened to this one.
Oh, this was in the packet that the chief did in his,
Oh, did he have that?
I think he had these, yeah. Oh, sorry, Bob.
So there's no, just so, the big thing is that the intent throughout, and it was never discussed otherwise, was that the intent was to adopt the noise bylaw standard for entertainment licenses. And inadvertently, they dropped it. They dropped the definition of plainly audible, which is clear, is right at the top of the bylaw, the noise bylaw, and left it undefined in the entertainment license. So that creates a real problem because leaves the regulation open for variable interpretation, doesn't give good guidance to enforcers, businesses, or residents. The police are put in a bind and they're forced to devise their own enforcement standards, their own bright line rules. And it's a departure, creates room for departure from what was determined at the public hearing. So in particular, the lyrics test that's been, I'm not sure if it's used all the time, but this last year the chief said that's what they were using. That's a huge difference over what was intended at the public meeting.
Well, again, that was the public hearing was 2016. Last year was 2000. That's 3 years. And as it's one, grown, but also two, the police being really on top of it and cautious with it too, and trying to work with everything.
Right.
I think they took into their own hands proactively to at least come up with something.
Right.
And
I'm not faulting them.
and
I
that
said they
may
had to
be-
come up with something.
Right, and so when we go to make the recommendations, that may be what we put in there, that we'd like to see everything match up, and then also have the test being, can you hear the lyrics, like we started to say earlier, as one of the guidelines. I mean, because the officers are going to need some kind of guidelines, as the chief said in 2 meetings ago, in order to be able to, but also too,
Well, yes and no. So
Yes and no, and we don't want I disagree with the can you hear the lyrics.
Yeah, so
well, how are they,
So
how are
they're-
we going to give them a guideline? What's...
By our definition of plainly
So
audible.
they're examples of
Right,
plainly
but
audible.
remember, they had also said that that's also
So-
part...
Okay.
So just take a look, for instance, at page 2. Here are 3 versions of plainly audible. And I handed out, we have dozens and dozens of these. So the simplest, most basic one, which is very common, is plainly audible means any sound that can be detected by a person using his or her unaided hearing faculties. That's just, can you hear it or not? That's a real easy test. Okay? That's in Sunrise Florida. It's a real easy test. The example from this paper, which is very similar to a whole lot of the other ones we saw, plainly audible means any sound that can be detected by a person using his or her unaided hearing faculties. Exact same as the beginning of this. But then it goes on, as a lot of the other ones do it, as an example, if the sound source under investigation is a portable, personal, vehicular sound amplification or reproduction device, the enforcement officer need not determine the title of the song, specific words, or the artist performing the song. The detection of the rhythmic bass component of the music is sufficient to constitute a plainly audible sound. And the chief even mentioned that at one point in an earlier meeting. So if they need a guideline, that's one solid guideline. Another guideline is it a male or female voice or simply instrumental? Is it what kind of instrument is it? Is it, high pitched, low pitched? Can you hear the melody? Those are all things that can be relatively easily determined. But basically, can you hear it or not? However, it gets a little tad more complicated because the actual definition in C in Harwich, and also which is coincidentally also from Dedham, plainly audible, and these are the only two places where I came across any mention of ambient. Plainly audible, any sound from a source regulated by this bylaw that can be detected above routine or normal ambient background noise by unaided human hearing. So the officer, or whoever's trying to determine this, has to say, well, I can hear street noise and the music. So that raises the threshold a bit and allows a bit more noise. But it's a real solid definition, and it's what was determined at the public hearing. So there's some concern. I know that this last meeting, people are concerned, like, oh, if you make it too tight, if you make your definition such that it's something like this, then people aren't going to be able to have music. And so my experience, and again, this is my personal experience, I did this informal noise survey all this last summer. Anytime I heard a lot of noise, I'd go out and just walk around and write down or jot down into my phone how far away I heard what. And at that time, I was assuming that plainly audible was, I wasn't aware of the entertainment license. I was assuming it was like plainly audible as in the bylaw. So I could hear 700, 500, 1,000, 12, it depended. So I jotted this down over and over and over again. What I didn't jot down, but which I also noticed, was that there were plenty of places that were within bounds. Every time I went out there, I'd go out to Port and Perks. They weren't both noisy at the same time. Somehow they figured out how to take turns. Maybe once or twice they were both noisy, but almost always, if one was noisy, the other was quiet. I'd see a guy strumming a guitar under one of the umbrellas at Perks, real intimate setting. Or next door at the Port, there's a guy sitting on that stool facing up at the bar. He doesn't get loud because he'd be blasting his listeners away, right? And it's always like that. There is room for light music. I'd walk by Ember, and there are plenty of times when they were well within range, and there's really inviting, low-key music. So I think it's
doable.
It's doable.
It's doable, yeah.
And if you want, and my feeling is that if the businesses want to create a party scene, boisterous, loud music, they either have to take it indoors or have to develop, put up noise mitigation.
Well, I think kind of like what you said, you walk by, they're playing outside, it's not overwhelming, then that just brings us back to the original thing we were talking about, is just turning the volume down.
Yeah.
Right.
But
To what level?
That takes us right back to how they define what that level is, but.
Well, again, it's not just 150 feet, it's more in the range of 250 feet, right? And that's in both directions, that's a big chunk of space. And if you stay at the can you hear the lyrics test? I mean, I'm hearing it at 800 feet, 1,000 feet. That's
Well, I mean.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's like a quarter mile.
Right. And
quarter mile diameter.
You make a good point. We want people to have entertainment. We want them to have live music, and sound waves do emit sound. Like if you create a definition that's, if you can hear it, then it's plainly audible, then, well, they wouldn't be able to have music because someone's going to be able to hear it.
Well, no, it's plainly audible at a certain point. So it's.
But what then? What
If
is
plainly audible at 150 feet is still nice music that people are enjoying.
Right.
That's what I saw.
People are still enjoying it.
And some of that really has to do with the configuration of the places. Like Port, I don't think I heard a peep from them almost all of 2018. I heard a ton from everybody else, but hardly anything from 2018. And it's because they have this little closed-in space where the guy performs, and it's a very small, intimate space.
Right.
And the same thing was happening at PERC this last year. They created this small, they shifted things around and made this small intimate space and made it nice for light music. They also like to have, and I understand they want to have bigger music, but I think they have to take, I would hope that they would take different precautions so that, or maybe we'd come up with like a split, the Harwich Unplugged, that kind of thing, but that seemed to go nowhere.
Well, that's getting us way ahead, where it says,
So,
revisiting given
Yeah.
any proposals given, but, yeah, as far as playing the audible,
Yeah, so my feeling, here's some draft recommendations. Let me switch over from this document to the letter. I cleaned this up a bit. So I took chunks out of this and I put them into, I thought we had a delivery report. So I raced all afternoon, I took stuff out of,
really hard, Bob.
here's this. So this is stuff from that, what we just looked at. Here, this is for Bob. And I stole a bunch of stuff from the intro to a parking committee meeting report. And so that whole first part we can review later, but and we can review all this again. But I basically just cleaned up and tightened that stuff. And then down at the end, I put down some views and recommendations, which, they're up for discussion. So first off is decibel metering. We recommend, my feeling is that we should defer consideration of it and put it off till later. However, this confuses people sometimes. Decibel monitors for businesses will help for self-regulation. So I wanted to be sure not to confuse people on that. That's why I put that note in there. For the plainly audible standard is sound, objective, and workable. However, the absence of a plainly audible definition in the entertainment license creates difficulties for all concerned and creates an inconsistency with the policies discussed and approved at the 2016 public hearing. So the recommendation that I propose is to update the entertainment license to include a definition of plainly audible, preferably consistent with what was discussed and approved by the public hearing, namely the definition as given in the bylaws. A recommendation, the lyric set should no longer be used to determine whether something's plainly audible.
Yeah.
Recommendation, have to update the wording of the entertainment license, remove further unreasonable. So, on the next page, this is the draft I came up with. So, in the liquor license, they format the definitions slightly differently, but I basically took the exact same language and started off, whenever the word plainly audible is used herein, it shall mean any sound that can be detected above routine or normal ambient background noise by unaided human hearing. So that, except for the lead-in, it should be exactly the same as what's in the bylaw.
Yeah.
Outside entertainment, the license, noise from entertainment must be at sound levels which are not plainly audible at a distance of 150 feet from the boundary line of licensee.
Yeah. That looks really good, Bob.
So I think that's fair. I think that's what was intended.
It's what was intended, yeah.
But I do understand what Cindy's saying, that, the police could use some more guidance, and I'm not sure we could do that in a separate, we could add some more to that, or we could, I think you could do it in a memo or something to the chief or something like that.
Doesn't need to be spelled out in here. I agree.
Okay, anything more on plainly audible? Are we? Okay. Secretary for next meeting. That's probably going to, if Angela's back, it's going to be me.
Okay.
Discuss any correspondence received from business community members. I got an email from Trish O'Neill at the very last minute when I was trying to get stuff done here.
I
for
just
that.
got that too.
So I think we just have to table it. I didn't even get a chance to
I haven't
read through
even read it yet.
Yeah.
It's- it
So
came-
just table that for next week.
Okay.
Did that come to all of us?
I
I
don't.
think it came to the residents.
Came-
I don't know.
I got one, and I just couldn't get to it. I sent her an email, told her I couldn't get to it.
I didn't get anything, so it must have just gone to the residents.
So, revisit any proposals given by public or committee members. I think the big thing that Angela wanted to talk about was Bob Nickerson's idea. Do you want to speak to that really quickly as to the two-track?
Do you want to wait to public comment or not?
Well, we'll have to table, we may have to table it because we might not get there. 'Cause I want to go into,
Well,
Because we can
How
only
much
go
time
to,
do we
we
have?
have to finish before
We've got
6:30.
We've got 15, I'm good.
The only thing I was going to say about revisiting any proposals given by the public or committee members, we had briefly talked, I remember we had all these ideas, and Walter made a point saying, well, the whole point is to make the noise quieter, so why are we really dictating what type of music they have? There were still some ideas in there that I kind of thought back to that might still be worthwhile, like maybe putting the speakers on the ground was one. Like, there were some gems in there that we could possibly
Yeah.
include in our proposal.
right.
And I think those are the things that you put like in the proposal, like a little punch list.
Yeah.
That this is, try this, this, and this.
Yeah. Yeah, or, we talked about, where is it, sorry?
We talked about house systems. we
Well,
talked
house
about-
systems, or just that the venue has to control the volume, that it
Right.
can't be left to the band. I think that was a pretty good, however they choose to do it, whether it's a house system or
Right.
they have some other means for controlling the volume, I don't know how it's done, but give them the option to choose the method, but just ensure that they're the ones controlling it, not the band. Those are two things that we had talked about previously that I thought were still good.
How, other than a house system, would they control it? I'm just asking, because I know, I read through all the Nantucket ones, and they all are required to use house systems.
And that's probably the best way, but. I
But
mean,
not
it's
everyone
certainly-
but I was
Yeah.
talking to some of the local bands,
Mhm.
and not everyone's system can go into,
Oh, we talked
So,
about
we
I
talked
that.
about
just
that.
find that hard to believe, because everything,
Because everyone's-
there's so many things on
But not
Amazon
every-
to plug my computer into any kind of different thing. It's just-
but not everyone's house system. Like, some of these businesses have spent thousands and thousands of dollars already for their house systems.
Yeah.
Not all bands' equipment that they have, which is also,
They
tens of
don't have
thousands.
adapters? I just find that hard to believe that they don't
The
have.
house systems probably have adapters.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, I did reach out to the bands, because I wanted to
Yeah.
have some kind of
Yeah.
thing to say, okay, well, here, you guys can do this. But I also know that the venues want to figure this out. They don't want to have,
Yeah.
a bad stigma, and right now they do.
Right.
So one thing that we didn't really talk much about, but we have in the past, is using decibel monitors. And I
Oh,
know
that's
that
good, yeah.
Sarah Powell was really keen on that. She thought that was a pretty good idea. And I think that's should be pretty easy. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't matter what the number is. Whatever number indicates the level that they shouldn't be at, that's good enough. And they should just tweak it, adjust it, and then they get, if it's the green-red light thing, then they should just put it up in front of the performers and figure out where to put their microphones. I don't think that's expensive. I think that's really,
Yeah, I don't
I think
know
that's
enough
really
about the
reasonable.
equipment or the cost, but I mean,
Well, what I saw on
Yeah.
Amazon, they're all like under $100.
yeah. Oh,
So I don't know if they're any good, but
Right.
it's worth trying.
Have you heard from any of the businesses in terms of how they intend to turn the volume down, how they intend to control the volume?
They're going to watch it, just like any of us would if we were having a house party. They're going to watch it, and if they feel that, then they'll turn it down, or if they get, I don't know that they're going to go out on 28, 150 feet to see.
Yeah.
But certainly, they're going to monitor much better.
They
But
say.
Sarah
Yeah.
said to me.
Well, I'm also going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not
Yeah.
going to just say that they're
Yeah,
just going to, they
yeah.
say they're going to do it.
Yeah.
No, Sarah,
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because, just leave it at that.
Sarah told me that they were real serious about putting up noise mitigation. I'm not
Noise
sure,
yeah.
I don't know, I think they were talking about doing tenting.
Tenting, yeah.
I
maybe.
mean, each one of them is in this downtime looking at things. I mean,
Yeah.
that last,
So,
the
yeah.
2 meetings ago that I was here, some of the owners were here.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering what they were
You know.
thinking about doing.
so I think they listened, and now they're working on what they're gonna do for, the season.
Can we move on to?
So you have issues list, defining the
Yeah,
business.
so in this, issues list, so I put together, I reorganized the old issues list and added
Yeah.
some other stuff in. And that's it, and I popped it into this, this report this draft report. So, there's some new stuff, but most of it is stuff we've already been through. So excessive noise, particularly the volume, there's an issue about how to measure volumes within the 150-foot limit, and constancy of noise. That's that's my problem at our house. Time-related issues, uniform start times, music in the afternoon. Big issue is 9:30 finales, where the performers crank it up at the end and people are trying to go to bed at the same time. And another big issue is not music related, but noise by the patrons after 10, and in particular cowbells and stuff like that. So I think we can talk. We're looking at issues right now, but
Yeah.
Prohibitions might be on cowbells might be reasonable. The 150-foot limit is it's apparently hard to measure by police or businesses. Maybe there's a way to work around that. I think it's important to realize that even if someone's within the 150-foot, and we've mentioned this before, even when someone's within the 150 feet, it can be too loud and they should be able to complain and have it turned down if, in fact, the music is audible at 300 feet. It makes it louder for the people within the 150 foot. The sound production issues, so here's the, I'm not sure we wrote this or discussed this much, but basically amplified music is just really hard to contain outdoors. And I think you and I had mentioned this, talked about this briefly once, Cindy. People want to replicate the indoor experience and do the same thing outdoors, but I think it's just really hard to do that and keep within reasonable bounds. And indoors, you get this reverberation off of your ceilings and walls, and you can play something, like I play piano at home, and it fills up the house. When I put the same piano outside, you couldn't hear it 150 feet away. And the same thing happens with a one or two guy combo inside. It's going to fill up the space, but you put them outside, it gets washed out. And so, I think what people tend to do is that they crank up the amps, and it gets really loud. So one of the advantages of tenting and curtains is that it reverberates back, and it allows them to get a bigger feel to the music without actually going further, because it's reverberating, it's coming.
So if I could interrupt,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
getting close to time that I have to go upstairs, and I know Bob wanted to say a few things too, so I
Yeah.
want to make sure that I get to hear that.
Okay.
I think what we can do, just jumping onto
Okay.
this, the issues list, let's put this back on the agenda, so we're all here, Angela's here too. So
Okay.
this that you
Okay.
did, let's put that back on the agenda, so we can
Okay.
go through it. Defining the business report, that again will be on the next
Okay,
agenda,
yep,
and then
yep,
the
okay.
suggested date is the February 24th. That's the suggested date for our,
Suggested,
well, it's now the definitive date.
okay.
But,
For our meeting with the
For-
Board of
yeah.
Selectmen.
exactly, so if
Sorry,
we can,
was the 24th?
yep, February 24th.
This is based on what you.
Yep, with Angela and I talked about it earlier, yep. So if we can jump, just because I want to hear what Mr.
Okay.
Nickerson has to say.
Yep.
not taking away from what you're doing, a future
Yeah.
agenda, kind of just put the issues list
Sounds good.
and spending our time on our report that we're going to do.
Yeah.
Should be
Okay.
what we do.
Okay.
But yeah, if we could, just so I don't want to not be able to hear what Bob has to say.
Well, a couple of things. First, McCaskill had said, Mike McCaskill, said, he doesn't want to see you guys making any recommendations. And I actually agree with that. But I think you put so much work together, I would suggest you go when you report and say, these are things we uncovered. We recommend us summarizing this report, giving it to all the venues that want it, so they're not having to do more homework, and you did all this work for them, and they can throw in the trash. But at least you have identified these things that they may or may not consider. So that gives them a chance to absorb all this work you did. That's just my 2 cents. Okay. As far as this whole violation process that I tried to talk about, and I couldn't speak last week because I wasn't allowed to, but for last time, what I was trying to get is there's a process we all know is really slow and cumbersome. Don't take that away. It's part of the process. Okay, but put another one parallel to it that is not as harsh. It's enticing. Okay, so I'm a venue, and I know I messed up. I know I went over. I know I'm going to lose if I go through the long one, and they're going to hammer me. But what if I go through the short one, and you have specifically defined penalties? It's not like, oh, we won't know until we go through it. No, they know that it's the first time they did the violation, they're off for a day. I'm not saying these are the exact answers,
Right.
but you know what I'm saying. Come up with a list. Okay, I've done 2 days, but heck, if I wait and go through the process, I might be off a week. Speed it up. If they agree to that and it's their agreement. I want to go A or I want to go B. If they want to go B, then they go the long process. They go A, I get it over with, and I'm done. Okay, but entice them to do that. Then the public gets to see some response to what you're trying to do instead of saying they never do anything.
Right.
Because that's what we're seeing now. They postponed both of those in December. I was the only one who went to the meeting, okay, and they told me they weren't going to have it.
Right.
And so now it's not even scheduled yet, that I know of.
Right.
So now we're talking 6 months?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Well, I think in defense of that office, there was some transition happening.
No, I get it,
So-
but they're not the ones that did it.
Yeah.
Both the businesses said they were unavailable, and
Okay.
both the businesses were represented the day before this meeting, and Joe told me that. So he was not happy.
So Angela objected to the idea because she didn't think it was fair that they would have to pay a harsher penalty. This is from last meeting.
That's
So,
their
so,
choice.
so the word I was trying to remember last week, it just didn't come to me, was plea bargaining. It's typical. People plea bargain all the time.
They
You
don't
make it
have
easy
to
on the
do it.
courts.
They don't have to do it.
Right.
Well, like he's saying, it's
They
actually,
have to hire a lawyer, they have to come in, it's a lot of cost, all that. Say, okay, I take 2 days, I've done this 5 times, I take, whatever the number is. And I
Right.
if
came
you
up
make
with
it
a-
enticing, it's like he
Right.
says, it's not as harsh as what it could be.
Yeah.
It's like the
And they already
mystery
know
or
that.
this,
But,
yeah.
but they could go to a number 3 and say, I want to go the other route. Well, they can go the other route the next time. It doesn't mean once they go the route, they always have to go the left
always
or
an
the
option.
right.
Yeah.
They can always choose, but once they choose, that's the route. But remember, if they start doing all these easy ones, and they're gonna get harder, because why would they not get harder? And then they go to the other one, it's probably gonna get really hard, because they already know, they have the history that they've gone through 5 times, and so forth. So it's just, I'm just thinking of process.
No,
The other thing.
it's great. Sounds great.
The other thing, I know you gotta go, but the other thing is, I honestly was very disappointed with the last meeting because it seemed like all of a sudden you weren't thinking about the residents, okay? I think this audible noise is critical. I think you need something in there that the chief can say, this is it. I think the chief is trying a lot, I've talked to him quite a bit, but he needs something to tell his officers that says, and it's not singing a song and hearing the words, because I don't know the words to almost any song out there
Right.
anymore. That's
Right.
the most
Yeah.
ridiculous thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
It has to be something more defined, rhythm, whatever it is. And it has to be checked, in my opinion, at 150 feet. I don't care if you call me, I call and I'm at 500 or 600 feet. and they said, well, it's not very loud here. That's not the point. The point is it loud enough for me to call at 500 or 600 feet, and at 150, it's definitely loud enough. You see what I'm saying?
No, absolutely.
So they could put in places, they could go to every location prior to the start of the summer. They could mark points, they could tell every officer where the points are and say, this is 150 feet, check it. Very easy, consistent. Consistent for the venue and consistent for the public.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are I won't give you any more time because you don't want to hear all the other stuff, because that gets way out of control. So I think you guys are trying, but I really hate to see you going away from not trying to get the volume down, because that's the key to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And again, the other thing is, I don't think you should tell them what music systems to use or any of that stuff.
You can't.
I think you just tell them,
Turn the
you know what
volume
you're gonna
down.
do.
Yeah.
And these are all the things we found, right? All these possibilities we're just giving you. We did all this research. Use what you want, don't use any of it. Just turn the volume down, whatever you want.
Right.
That's my.
But I think we need to have something in there that gives residents assurance, not just that there's going to be volume down there, they don't have to be struggling and always fighting the whole thing.
Right.
And
Well, we're gonna-
so hopefully,
we'll see
like,
how successful it is once the summer starts.
yeah, hopefully, like, strict, severe.
Severe penalties will force them to turn the music
And
down.
that's- decibel
the last
monitoring.
thing, this isn't
Yeah.
a right to have. They don't have a right to play music.
No, they
They have a
don't.
license.
They have a there's no God-given right that they have, that they get to play music as loud as they want at their venue and disturb everybody. And for those that don't live in town, if I came and bought the house next to you and put my music on in my backyard at 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, and everybody within 150 feet could hear it, would that be fair? That's what you have to think about. And that's what
Well,
you're
now
asking us to
remember,
do.
Chief did tell us, I don't know if you were at that meeting, but he went through the noise
Oh,
complaints.
yeah, that was very
And there-
enlightening.
Yeah, there were
But
more.
they
that were-
responded to those.
Yep.
So, and guess what? That plainly audible isn't that they had to hear the music, whatever. I mean, it's a whole different thing, so I get that part. But just think about it. Think about you living here all the time.
Yeah.
You out of here?
Do you want to adjourn the meeting? So that
If here's-
I
Yeah,
mean, unless you
motion
guys
to
have-
adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We're done.
And